Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ian Pratt. I am the Peacemonger. Today is Sunday, the 1st of March. I'm delighted to welcome today Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago. Professor Pape is the director of the Chicago Center for
Well,
Security and
security and threats.
Threats.
Security and threats. Thank you, Ian.
He has just started a fantastic Substack, which I really recommend you read. He's produced some fabulous articles just over the past days since the war against Iran has started. Called remind me of the name of the Substack.
The escalation trap.
The Escalation Trap, and he's produced actually quite some time ago, but looking to kind of dust it off again now. Bombing to Win, about the history of air campaigns, to achieve kind of regime change, which is a perfect place to start our discussion today, talking about the air campaign, against Iran. I apologize.
It's
Uh,
okay.
Robert, why don't you set the scene? Why don't you set the scene of the things you've been writing about over the past 2 days? I mean, I was struck by a really good quote in one of your articles saying air power alone has never produced positive regime change. I don't mean
That's right. So
rarely,
let me
I
start
mean
there,
never.
Ian. And really,
Yeah.
it's quite a great pleasure to meet you first time face to face, and to be on your show and to talk to your viewers. Uh, President Trump is now up against the weight of history. For over a century, states have been trying to use air power to topple governments, to strengthen pro-democracy movements, to foment uprisings in dozens and dozens of cases. The Americans have tried it multiple times. Europeans have tried it. Russia has tried it. And in every case, and I'm choosing my words carefully, it has always failed. Let me say that one more time. Air power alone to produce positive regime change, where the government shifts in the direction that the air power attacker wants it to, has never worked in over 100 years. That is in the dumb bomb age. That is when we're smashing cities. In the precision age, when we can put a bomb within 5 feet of a leader and certainly killing the leader and everybody around him. It has never worked. Now, what do you get? What you get is either a slightly reconfigured government regime that's doing about the same thing, just slightly reconfigured. Think about that. You could even talk about that with, say, Venezuela. Or you end up with a much more radicalized regime. Nationalism comes in. I don't mean religion. I don't mean ideology. I don't mean partisan. I don't mean cronyism. I mean nationalism becomes infused in the regime and the wider society. And you often end up with severe lashback, catastrophic failure. Not just, oh, it didn't work, we move away to something else. That then, Ian, produces what I'm explaining on the Substack, the escalation trap, is the trap. And with smart bombs, I call it specifically the smart bomb trap. You see, this is with smart bombs, we have the illusion of control. They are definitely accurate. So I have spent 3 years teaching for the U.S. Air Force. I've taught conventional targeting strategy for the U.S. Air Force. I have advised every White House since 9/11, not this particular White House yet, although I've been invited to the Pentagon in the middle of March. That should be quite interesting. And the fact of the matter is, we really do have highly accurate bombs, GPS sensors, laser guided, just a whole panoply of these highly accurate weapons. So the issue with the smart bomb trap is not that the smart bombs don't work. This is a mistake. Uh, they are highly accurate, And those highly accurate bombs, which land, again, within 5, 10 feet of their target, 80 to 90% of the time, even in these moderate winds. I mean, you really need a gale to kind of blow these things off target. Creates an illusion, not the illusion of accuracy, the illusion of control. The illusion of control. And you hear this almost all the time with the folks on cable television shows who are positive about this. We dominate the sky. We dominate this. We destroyed. It's extraordinary. Well, actually, it's not extraordinary anymore. 1991, the first Gulf War, it was pretty extraordinary to watch those smart bombs in action. I have to say now, I have been involved in writing about, commenting on every air campaign since 1991. That's really quite a. I was a young kid at the time I started. I started doing this. It's not extraordinary anymore. It's to be expected. We would be shocked if the air campaign that President Trump announced on Saturday morning missed even a third of its targets. We almost always start the air campaign now when intel tells us we've got the prime leader in our sights. That's actually often the trigger. And that's why you can ask, well, why did you start it today? And they don't want to give you an answer. It's because the CIA probably has said the supreme leader is going to be at one of these three places. And we know this as a fact because we have human intel, usually right there next to the leader. So not like far away. And that is often the exact precipitant to the exact hour and time that these precision decapitation strikes start. Because as you would expect, you're going to fuse intelligence with the highly accurate bombs. So is it a surprise to me that we killed the leader? Absolutely not. And that's why, Ian, when you're reading, so I have been now expecting this campaign for several weeks. And you could see it building, and you could watch on my X account here as I explain to the world the armada that was being built. You know, it's really quite amazing. I never before had 7.5 million views on a post. It was like, wow, that was something for someone like me. I'm used to op-eds. But anyway, but it was clear. It was clear we were building up. It was clear 75% likely we were going to go. Were we sure to go? No, but you don't put that much air power in the region and the tankers, the logistics, if you're not really serious. So once I knew that, that's when I started the Substack here. And as I explained to you, I've had this half-written book on the smart bomb trap for about forever. And this seemed like a good opportunity to bring it out and try to explain to the world. And that's why I'm not at all surprised we kill the leader on day one, on hour one, probably here. And it's because this is now part and parcel of standard operating procedure with smart bombs. But precision, tactical precision success, even 100% tactical success is not the same as strategic success. As much as we want to believe that, it's not. And this is something I talk to my students about all the time. The problem is there's a gap, and it's even worse than the gap. The problem is the tactical success, the very act of bombing, changes the trajectory of politics inside the state, inside the government, inside the society. It's not like the pre-war trends are misunderstood or miscalculated or misperceived. It's literally the bombing itself changes the pre-war trends, radicalizes politics, and you get very, very different expectations and outcomes. And Intel can't see that. It just literally can't see that in because it hadn't happened yet. Intel is fantastic at describing, collecting what is happening. Intel's not very good when it comes to what's going to happen, and especially the politics. And you see, that's what, so when I taught for the US Air Force and what my book, Bombing to Win, is all about, I know a ton about how to put bombs on targets and how that changed with the precision age. What it's really about is how bombing impacts the politics of societies and target governments. That's the specialty of my area. That's why the best pilots in the Air Force come to me to get PhDs at the University of Chicago. They're not coming to learn how to put a bomb on a target. They've been promoted below the zone for that. That's not it. They're coming because they may, and some of them have become generals, and they want to know much more about the actual strategy of air strategy, not the tactics of the air operations. And they don't want to just be mesmerized because many of them will, in their careers, have seen, although they didn't call it the smart bomb trap, they've seen it in action, which is everybody was 100% success, confident just before the attack because they knew they could destroy the targets, and then things went awry. Things started to go in different directions, and that is where I come in, and I help to create those frameworks that you mentioned that are helpful to try to understand where we're heading.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, not necessarily in the context of being bombed, but you can see how the war in Ukraine has changed the internal politics of Russia, for example, in this, and also, of course, the internal politics in Ukraine itself, albeit I'd argue, in completely different ways. And yet, despite all this great learning you give to these pilots, the US seems to be kind of sailing into this, without obviously a clear strategy in mind, or at least that's how I read it. I mean,
Well, we have a real challenge when it comes to air strategy, national security strategy, which is we're no longer privileging depth of knowledge of strategy. Um, and we used to in the Cold War. We also, although we were kind of a little thrown off in the 90s for a bit, and I know because I was teaching for the Air Force, I was debating the leadership decapitation, not school, but the actual advocates who originated the entire strategy. I know them very, very well. I would go to Norway. We would debate in front of the Norwegian Air Force. We debate in front of the German Air Force. We debate in front of the American Chiefs of Staff here of the Air Force. So I'm very, very familiar with how this actually emerged. But the fact of the matter is, in the 90s, and then even as we got into the Forever Wars, we still had this depth of knowledge, and we also had the desire to know here. But as we got into it after 9/11, we switched gears. Suddenly, it seemed like a lot of the old strategy didn't really matter because, of course, we're up against terrorists. So, and of course, my work changes as well. So I'm not saying you don't adapt, but what you saw in the last 20 years is you've seen a real disconnect with the depth of understanding just what has happened in past air campaigns. So that's one of the things I'm doing on the Escalation Trap Substack, which is I'm giving like little mini case studies of what happens when you actually killed the leader. Let's actually study a case and really see what happened when that really happened. There's just so much to really draw on. And it's one of the reasons it's really taking off here. It's really something to watch because I think now that we're in the middle of the crisis, people are really hungry for this, and they can't get it in the New York Times. They can't get it anywhere else because you don't have the reporters much who know who they weren't around. Many of them weren't even around. But even if they were, they don't have the editors to have the depth to really cover those events the way we used to all the time.
yeah, I suppose, I mean, setting aside Venezuela for just a moment, and on the basis that the Arab Spring really emerged out of kind of domestically kind of driven political circumstances that swept across the whole of North Africa at the time I was involved in that. I was based in the Foreign Office in London when that was unfolding. I mean, this appears to be the first time we've actually tried to decapitate a state in 20 years. It's more than 20 years.
Well, no, well, actually, so just to give you and your listeners some of the history here, and this just in the precision age. So the very first act in the precision age was Ronald Reagan, April 1986,
Mm.
when he sought to use some of our earliest precision weapons to decapitate Muammar Gaddafi. We literally bombed his tent where he was sleeping. We missed him by seconds because he literally stepped out of his tent in the middle of the night. We killed everybody else in that tent, including his 3-year-old daughter. but we just happened to miss him. And this is a point I make here, retaliation, nationalism, it kind of comes in, but it doesn't come the very next day always. It comes on the target's timetable, not on the attacker's timetable. 2 years later, Libyan intelligence agents blew up Pan Am Flight 103 in retaliation, killing 271, everybody on board, 190 Americans on board. And your government, Britain, there was a giant trial here with an international court that went on for years in the 90s, has loaded with documents and so forth of the connection with the Libyans and et cetera, et cetera. So that was actually the first actual precision air campaign was a leadership decapitation strike. And you can really kind of understand that if you suddenly have a tool and before the precision age, your bomb fell within, at best, 1,000 feet of your target half the time, 1,000 feet of your target half the time. And suddenly the briefer walks in and says, well, Mr. President, with this new technology, it is now within 10 feet, 90% of the time. You can see right away that they start thinking about offices, leaders. It's just inexorable that that happens. So that was really the first case. And then in the first Gulf War in 1991, it opened with a campaign called Instant Thunder,
Mm.
which was designed by John Warden. This is the arch advocate of leadership decapitation strikes. He got the idea from our leadership decapitation models with nuclear weapons. I know this in depth because I spent years with him. I know quite a bit. John was really such a true believer. He was glad to talk voluminously about his ideas. Anyway, so he designed the campaign Instant Thunder that led off the first Gulf War, January 17th, 1991. It was a 3-day air war that was going to then be repeated with a 6-day war. And the whole idea was to win the war with air power alone. And it was target on Saddam Hussein, all those leadership targets, hundreds of them, not a few here or there, and all of them were destroyed. Almost 100% tactical precision success. And nonetheless, in that case, Saddam was not killed himself, but even more important, no paralysis. No paralysis. Now, there was a 39-day air campaign. We smashed the army in Kuwait. My book, Bombing to Win, goes through this in detail to explain. With precision air power, the actual revolution is your ability to bomb the army in the field, which you really couldn't do very well before. But that really comes out in the book. You really see the power of precision air power here, and it's real, but it's not against leaders. It's against armies in the field. Well, anyway, so we did kick Saddam out of Kuwait. We use our precision air power hammer to do that. And then President Bush, again, thinking, oh, Saddam's weakened. He can be easily toppled. You just had this major defeat. He calls on the Shia to rise up. Sound familiar, like President
Mm.
Trump? He
Yeah.
literally calls on the Shia to rise up. Saddam's a Sunni. They're got 20% of the Iraqis. The Shia are 40%. So you would think, oh my goodness, Sunnis are weakened. Saddam's weakened. We fractured his regime in all these different ways. And what happens? The Shia rose up and Saddam slaughtered them in the streets by the thousands. The bodies piled up, and we had to stand there and watch and watch and watch. And that was one of the most embarrassing, morally destructive moments here. I taught many of those pilots who were involved in this situation when I was in the teaching for the Air Force here. This was a really, really big deal. And you might say, well, wait a minute, we had an army close by. No, you can't get there in an hour. Okay. When those bullets come against the civilian uprisers here, the cloth shirts don't act like armor. Those bullets go right through them, and many of them here. And so in just a few hours, he mowed them down here. And you saw that with the Iranian regime here just a few weeks ago. In hours or in a day or two, an enormous number of bodies can be killed here by the security forces here. And that is really what you're up against. When you're calling for the uprising here, well, that may all sound well and good in Washington, D.C. or in Europe. But Europe didn't really do this. But I'm just saying the problem here is the people who pay the price are usually the pro-democracy civilians. And what happened in the case of Iraq, of course, is that set back democracy for a long time. In fact, many people, even after our ground war and today, don't necessarily sure Iraq would count as a democracy even today.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's a chilling analysis. Frankly, I think the point I was making was that this is the first time really since the 2003 Iraq War that we've actually tried this, decapitation strategy.
It's the first time against states, Ian. But let me just sort of add, and I'm sorry to just keep jumping in, but
That's good.
against terrorist leaders, we do this all the time. Sinwar,
Of
for
course.
example. So just literally, Israel. Israel has decapitated numerous Hezbollah leaders, numerous Hamas leaders. They just killed Sinwar here, and it's really not having any real effect. Now, I have also studied the issue of air power against terrorist groups and air power against decapitating terrorist groups in great detail. I actually, if with my center, we conducted a 15-volume study for the military on this about 10 years ago. So we called it the Over the Horizon campaigns here. So we studied all of them in Somalia, just all over the place. So we know really quite a bit about this issue. And let me just simply say, 90% of the time, it's exactly the same story as with states. There is a corner, and I'll tell you where it applies most, where with a terrorist group, you can have more leadership decapitation effectiveness, and that's when the terrorist group is not embedded in the local social networks of the community, and that's what happened with Al Qaeda in Pakistan. So there were hundreds of Al Qaeda operatives, including Osama bin Laden. After Tora Bora, they ran to Pakistan and they were there for years. And I actually argued to do this. I didn't argue against it, that we should go and knock them off here. And why would that make sense, especially for me, because I'm known as this arch opponent of the other side and have all the details. Well, it's because this is exactly a different situation where in Pakistan, there's no prospects that when you remove those Al Qaeda leaders who are coming mostly from the Persian Gulf and Northern Africa, there's no prospect they're going to be bottom up replaced by Pakistanis. That's what happens in the case of, say, Sinwar, when the Israelis kill Sinwar, just immediately replaced. Same thing with Iran, just immediately replaced. They plan on it. Many of them are proud to die as martyrs for their country. It's for them, it's their version of getting the Congressional Medal of Honor here. This is a pretty big deal for them because they're going to eventually die and they want their deaths to mean something here. Well, so this gives you a fuller picture, Ian, of what when I'm, sort of briefing, military staffs, the NSC, what I'm really trying to explain to them here is there's a range here. It is not simply have precision hammer win strategic victory. You see,
Yeah.
that's way too crude. Which doesn't mean there aren't advantages to precision air power, but this is where the real work of the strategist comes in and the real knowledge of what happened in past campaigns comes in. It's not because we study history for its own sake, it's because we can really see it as a test bed.
Yeah. No, I see that. I mean, the point I was making is this is the first time substantively that we've actually decapitated a head of state of a UN sovereign
Yep,
nation, and of
that's
course,
right. You're quite right. Yep.
Osama bin Laden, Sinwar, all these people, okay, they get replaced, like the many-headed Hydra, and so on. Anybody who's watched the film Munich about the kind of the aftermath of the kind of Munich terrorist attacks of 1972 would see that actually Black September, whatever it's called, just filled back all of the kind of people that the Israelis kind of murdered through the telephones and that sort of thing. But Iran is a sovereign state. as you pointed out in one of your posts, with 92 million people, up to 1 million, potentially service personnel. I think it's a standing force of 610,000. I mean, that is substantively different. And you just mentioned at the top there, tactical success does not equal kind of strategic victory, strategic control. I mean, I see no way for the US to exert strategic control in these circumstances.
Well, before we get to that, Ian, let me just add one or two points to your really quite excellent analysis that you just gave here, which I agree with 100%. And I just want to add a couple little tidbits to it, which is just extend it and think about the precedents we have just set in the last 36 hours. And think about them for what this means besides the Middle East. So if we just come to Asia, for example, and we know President Xi has been extremely interested in Taiwan. He's given orders for his military to be prepared for operations in 2027, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we don't know what Xi's going to do, of course. We have no crystal ball. But one of the things that has just happened is a tremendous precedent that if Xi wants to begin any operations against Taiwan with leadership decapitation strikes, what exactly is the moral position now of the United States, or the legal position of the United States? Are we going to say, well, no, it's okay for American president to decide when they want to assassinate a leader from a leader of a sovereign state from the air, but somehow that's not okay for other leaders to do? Now, of course, Zelensky must be in Ukraine. You mentioned you studied this issue quite a bit. I can only imagine how this is going down in Kyiv with Zelensky and his family. He's already been, of course, the target of a number of things, but now there's legitimacy being added, or precedent being set, I guess I would say. And so your point is really, I think we don't want to move beyond it too quick. It was really quite excellent, Ian, and I think it bears, your audience really contemplating. We're moving into a new age here. We're moving into an age where this is akin to the end of the Cold War. Things are changing rather dramatically. It's not so much technology, although that's changing a bit too with drones, but we're changing politically, internationally, in ways that we really haven't seen since the end of the Cold War. And I think it really is the case. I've been very busy. I'm sorry to say I'm expecting to stay busy for quite some time, because these tools here are no longer the province of just a handful of precision air power advocates in the basement of the U.S. Pentagon.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I would add that Taiwan isn't actually, strictly speaking, a sovereign state. Even according to the US, it is recognized by a small number of Pacific nations, of course, but not most kind of Western allies. And Zelensky, I mean, I don't want to sound glib, but he doesn't spend much time in Ukraine anyway, although that, of course, may also be a risk,
Yeah,
to him.
exactly, Ian. It's just the last thing I think we need is to add is sort of precedent to these fires. We have enough of the fire as it is.
Yeah, but we have just done
But
that.
we have. But we maybe I will. You encourage me to go out and do the smart bomb trap, but maybe that will end up happening. But I'll
Well, no,
probably do it on a Substack first.
I think you should. Well, I mean, you could serialize it, of course, and then sort
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
pitch it as a book project. I think it's worthwhile. But strategic control. I mean, I was talking to Colonel Daniel Davis. He has a popular kind of a podcast over there. In the US, ex-military guy involved in Operation Desert Storm, one of Bond Star as a tank commander. In that theater, of operations. I mean, there's no scope for the US to have boots on the ground. It seems to me, not at least for another 6 months. You know,
I think that's right. The way I explain this on the Substacks, Ian, and in my general thinking, is that with the escalation trap, and especially with the smart bomb trap, this is occurring in three stages. And it's not just generally happening, but there's three stages that are progressive loss of control. And I have been teaching about this in my classes at the University of Chicago for years. In fact, at the end of every spring, we modeled a bombing campaign of Iran for 20 years. And we just literally did it last spring at the end of May before we did the bombing of Bordeaux. So very, very, very familiar. We spent all 90 minutes going through all the bombing, the scenarios, the aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. And basically, that's why I was able to sort of see what would likely happen. So stage one of the smart bomb trap, and we'll do it in this respect of Iran, is you bomb the nuclear site. You bomb Fordow, you bomb Natanz here, use our B-2s. We have our Moab, that's the 30,000-pound precision weapon
Yeah.
that was specifically built for Fordow. You do what I call double tap attacks. That is with GPS, what most people don't know, Ian, is the GPS is not two-dimensional the way you might think about it on your phone with your car. It's actually three-dimensional. So that what that means for an air attack, an air planner, is that you can target a bomb to crater a deeply buried target, crater dirt, and then 30 seconds later have another bomb hit the hole another 30, 40 feet deeper, then have another bomb blast through the concrete ceiling of the bunker. You see, and you can just do this. It's called I call it the double tap attacks, even though it could be triple or quadruple attack. And that is how you drill in. And so that's why for 20 years, I've been saying to, including folks from the Israeli Air Force who would take my class, that this would almost surely be a 90% likely to succeed. The Israelis didn't have quite these capabilities for Fordow in particular, so they would probably need the Americans. So this exactly happened exactly as we modeled it, and we were exactly 90% successful. However, then there's a problem after stage one. It's 100% tactically successful in terms of cratering dirt and concrete, but you don't know where the enriched uranium is. And the Iranians are not likely to let you in and inspect it. And that, of course, did not happen. And that means that even though you were 100% tactically successful, you were 100% strategically uncertain. And that uncertainty then, long argued, would build over the course of the next year or maybe two into real obsession with what happened with that enriched uranium. And in this case, there was enough enriched uranium, 60, 20, and 5, for 16 bombs. Not one bomb, not five bombs, 16 bombs according to the IAEA. So that's our best assessment for that. So that's a lot of material to worry about over time. So on day one, you could say, oh, we obliterate, we're happy, we declare victory, mission accomplished. But over time, and that leads to stage two. And that's right where we are right now, which is you take out the regime. You try to take out the regime. I said this was always going to be how regime change was going to happen, or the efforts for regime change. It was always going to be you take out Trudeau first. You then panic because you don't know what's happening with that enriched uranium, and the bombs could be built in hundreds and hundreds of tiny facilities in Iran. So the only way to really get a grip on this is you start talking yourself into taking out the regime. That's what we're doing now. And we can have like a small attack, a few targets. That's where we are today. Or we can have several weeks. We can hit hundreds or thousands. We can go, further. But the bottom line is going to be, Ian, and I said this on the Substack last night, that we will not know where that enriched uranium is. So we're going to go through, we're going to do all this. Okay. And at the end of the day, President Trump is still going to say, well, I hope Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. I hope Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. Okay, I mean, just think about that for a moment. And we will have accelerated nationalism to maximally incentivize any effort possible by Iran to have a nuclear weapon because they definitely got the memo. That's about the only way to stop these attacks. And so now then, 6 months from now, like let's say we do this for either 2 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, doesn't really matter here. But now, and let's say Iran doesn't even respond, which I don't think will happen. But still, let's assume the best case possible for Trump and America. 6 months from now, a year from now, maybe during the elections, we're right back at it. What is going on with that enriched uranium? You see. So that obsession is still going to be there because that is the $64,000 issue in this case. And that is where you get stage three. And stage three is that pull for actual territorial control. Not all at once. Iran's way too big for anything like that. But you could start to see that, oh, why not have, 30,000 Marines take the oil fields? President Trump has often said with the Iraq War in 2003, we should have taken the oil fields. Well, that's a mission for 30,000 Marines. That something like that. You see what I mean? Anyway, I'm not saying we're going to go to stage three. I'm saying that this is the smart bomb trap. We're being sucked down this road because the bombs are causing politics to change. That politics is radicalizing and it's creating intense fears of what could happen to us, especially on the nuclear dimension. And that is what's sucking us down the road of escalation. It's not simply, oh, JD Vance promising we won't escalate. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, you've got midterms coming up, and
You got midterms coming up. You could have, just imagine if Iran wanted to have a radiological bomb, not an actual nuclear bomb, but they have 1,000 pounds of 60% enriched uranium. They have 500 pounds of 20% enriched uranium, and they have 10,000 pounds of 3.5 to 5% enriched uranium. Just putting this in perspective. Now, you only will, and they still have all the cesium-137 in their hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. So you just imagine if before those midterms, Iran starts to decide that they're going to set off a dirty bomb somewhere. My goodness, my goodness. Now we're back to LBJ territory. Now we're back to that. And for your listeners, that's the president of the United States who was president in during the Vietnam War. And then when things were so bad with the Tet Offensive, because he promised we're victory, we don't have to escalate anymore. And then he was embarrassed because the VC launched this major
Yep.
campaign. And yes, they lost every individual battle, but it embarrassed the president so much that he dropped out of the race. Richard Nixon won. That is the other party won. The Republican Party won. And that's what we're facing with when you say the midterms. It's an LBJ moment.
Yeah. As they say in the British military, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Uh,
These are the smart bomb trap problems. These are the issues that we're not dealing with. Again, this issue of are they smart people or not? It's strategy is a really complicated business, but frameworks can really help get a grip on how to understand where we are.
What? Because I teach strategic thinking to university students aspiring to become diplomats, in the future. And I mean, what was the starting sort of end state that do you think people in the White House were kind of conceptualizing when they thought up this idea?
So when I first started to develop these frameworks of escalation, Ian, it was in the early 90s when I taught for the U.S. Air Force. Because what happened is I was coming out, I just had done this PhD on coercive air power. I was just all over the media with the first Gulf War because we had no talking military heads at that point, and the journalists didn't have the framework. So I had frameworks in my dissertation, now my book, to help understand this. But I learned something when I taught for the Air Force. It wasn't just a one-way street where I taught them. And they always started, which sounds very right, okay, and you'll see what I mean in a moment, with, well, you want to know what the political end state is that's desired by the commander in chief, your president. And they always say, the president tells you what is the end state, the political end state, and then your job, military, and it could be the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force, is to construct the military campaign to reach that end state. Well, what I realized in watching these briefings, you see, that I would get because this was a school. I was part of the School of Advanced Airpower Studies. It's now Air and Space Studies. I helped stand up the curriculum for the school. It's really quite an honor because I'm an actual civilian, not a retired military. It's really a big honor in my life. But what I learned was, oh, I see, they're missing the escalation middle. That is, if you think about the whiteboard, okay, where you, again, we had whiteboards, literally whiteboards, okay, and you would have, this is the end state we want in Bosnia. For example, Bosnia was a big case at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, I see the problem. They think this is static. They think here's the end
Yeah.
state the president wants.
Yeah.
Here's our military capability. Now we just organize the bombing runs to fit the end state. What I realized is they were missing the dynamics of how the escalation changes during the campaign. It's not the same as before the war. You see,
Yeah.
things change, and some of the things they were frustrated, like nationalism was something Intel, you couldn't just go to the CIA and hand that off as an Intel problem because it hadn't emerged yet, or it's emerging, but it's not congealed yet. You really needed to understand politics, not just hand it off to some other office. So that's what happened, and that's how I started to understand the need, I guess I would say, for these escalation dynamics and the need for frameworks on the escalation dynamics, not just simply say, well, it all depends. That's not very helpful to the actual folks in the middle of these really quite serious problems and quite serious problems for their country. And they're really trying to do their best. I mean, I really believe for real, I mean, maybe not every single one, but I mean, oh my God, that what I saw up close and personal, and this is true of all the White Houses I've advised as well. You get behind without the cameras, my goodness, the effort people are going to try to do the right thing, but they're trying to do it in the compressed period of time of a crisis. You know, it's like when I talked to the Wall Street Journal reporter yesterday, he just now bought Bombing to Win, and he's trying to read a 350-page book, and it's like, oh, this actually is really quite a book. It's not just a quick and dirty, and he doesn't have 3 weeks to take my classes. Well, that's why I did the Substack, because hopefully people make it a little easier to understand some of those frameworks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the problem of very linear thinking, isn't it? In the
You
absence
got it.
in the absence of escalation frameworks and a lack of appreciation and analysis of risk and how to mitigate those risks and how to forecast, what the potential scenarios are if those risks, manifest themselves. But and when it comes to crisis, kind of, and sadly I have a lot of experience in that too, including right back to 9/11. I sort of flew back from the US on the night of 9/10, having been in Langley, the Pentagon, and other places. That
Uh,
time. Crisis management is at the point where you become very tactical and very agile. It's kind of downstream of the strategy bit. You're dealing with the consequences of bad strategies sometimes, or you're just dealing with the consequences of natural events like natural disasters, and that sort of thing. But it's this kind of lack of it's linear thinking coupled with a lack of appreciation of risk and a lack of
and also the
framework to
time
make.
and time. I really think, Ian, you've been through it. You speak like someone who's lived it. The issue is that also in this compressed period of time where there's incoming information almost every 10 minutes at sometimes every minute, but really every 10 or 15 minutes, it's so difficult at that point to get up to speed on thinking about the nonlinear aspects.
Yeah, no, exactly. And we get caught in short-term thinking. We get caught in
Because of the crisis. Yeah. And you can
yeah,
see right away that the crisis imposes this. And so a lot of people in the middle of the crisis, they just kind of give up on this. That's why but that said, now that we have some experience with this, I think we can hopefully try to have some better outcomes. I'm not saying, we can do perfect, but I think we can have better outcomes. And I really appreciate the chance to try to explain this.
yeah, no, that's very good. I just struggle to see how the US is going to come out of this very well. Not just in terms of the theatre of operations, but in terms of its kind of its influence on the world stage.
Oh, I'm very concerned about this. Very concerned. I think in this sort of very, very macro picture, people keep trying to find these frameworks for the grand strategy that President Trump, is it spheres of influence? Is it this? Is it that? Uh, and I think a lot of this is coming from MAGA mass politics, by the way. I don't think it's coming from, sort of realism debates and so forth.
No,
But what I also think is that because we are now lurching from use of military force, unilateral use, from event to event, including in Chicago, where I live, and Minneapolis. So this is not simply international. You are really seeing the world and also in the United States, I think some really fundamental relationships are starting to shift. Not could shift, but are literally starting to shift. And this is not good for America. And that's why also I think we need to have more depth here. A little, it's not enough to simply follow the events on our phones. We need to have a little bit more depth. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. It's been a terrific conversation. Thanks so much for joining today. Yeah, I mean, this feels like a moment in time where the US hasn't really kind of thought through the strategic consequences of its actions, but time will tell how far into the smart bomb trap they get caught, or whether there is a moment of de-escalation. I hope very much for the latter, but I absolutely would encourage everybody to read Robert's Substack, The Escalation Trap. It's brilliant, brilliantly written, I have to say. It's possibly the best thing I've read over the past
Well, that's
24
really quite
hours.
kind of you. That's so kind of you to say because you consume quite a bit. Thank you.
And I certainly shall buy your book straight after coming off of this call. The bombing for victory, is it? Bombing to win.
Bombing to win. Bombing to win.
So thank you, Professor Pape, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for watching.
Absolutely.
Please do like and subscribe if you find these conversations insightful and help you make sense of, frankly, this crazy and disrupted world better, with a view towards peace. Wherever you are in the world, I wish you very much peace. And finally, Robert, thanks so much for joining us today.
Quite a pleasure. Quite a pleasure, Ian. Very much enjoyed our conversation.